My name is Elise Moreau. I'm 32 and I work as an interior architect in the elegant heart of Paris. Life seemed steady, my career climbing steadily, my small Montmartre apartment a cozy refuge from the city's bustle. Yet everything I had believed about my family shattered one rainy afternoon. I stumbled upon a shocking secret hidden in my parents' will, a revelation that tore away the comforting illusion of fairness I had clung to. In that moment, the truth hit me with the force of a thunderclap. I had never been more than a pawn in their carefully orchestrated game. And the one they truly favored, the one who could do no wrong, was my idle younger brother, Julian. The unfairness of it all left a bitter taste, but it also ignited something in me, a determination to understand why the family I thought I knew had turned its loyalty so blatantly toward him. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. A heartbreaking discovery. It all began a few months ago when I decided to visit my parents at their old family estate on the outskirts of Lyon. The house, with its moss-covered stone walls and a lavender garden that smelled faintly of summers past, had long been a source of pride for the Moreau family. Yet behind the beauty and charm, there was a weight of financial strain that I had been quietly bearing for 7 years. I had helped pay the mortgage, covered repair bills, even bought new furniture when my mother, Madame Claire, complained about the estate's aging interiors. Every tile I replaced, every bill I settled, I did silently, never seeking recognition because family came first, or so I believed. Meanwhile, my younger brother Julian, 27, did nothing but drift through life like a penniless aristocrat. He spent his days hopping from bar to bar, laughing and charming strangers, expecting life to hand him everything on a silver platter. I watched him, half in disbelief, half in frustration, as he continued to rely on the family's wealth without lifting a finger. He had never cared about the house, the bills, or the sacrifices I had made. That afternoon, I had gone to help my father, Monsieur Henri, organize a mess of financial paperwork that had accumulated over the years. He always complained that he was too old to understand numbers, and as usual, I had slipped into the role of the family's problem solver. As I sifted through the towering stacks of documents, invoices, and ledgers, my attention was drawn to a folder marked Estate Plan and Final Will. My curiosity sparked. I told myself I had a right to know after all I had done for the family. I opened the folder with trembling hands, expecting perhaps a routine update or some dry legal notes. What I found instead made my heart stop. Every single asset, the multi-million euro estate, the savings accounts, my father's shares in his small but respected wine business, was designated for Julian. Not a word from me except for a perfunctory line stating that they loved both children equally. Loved equally? I felt bile rise in my throat. How could this be love? For years, I had poured my energy, my finances, and even my personal dreams into keeping this family afloat. I had sacrificed scholarships, career opportunities, and my own freedom to ensure the household ran smoothly. I had been the one who shouldered the estate's crumbling infrastructure, the rising costs, the endless headaches, and yet in their eyes I was invisible. The rage that welled up inside me was matched only by a deep, stinging sense of betrayal. I thought of the nights I spent poring over bills, calculating budgets, and mediating conflicts between my parents and Julian. I remembered every time I had given up something important for the sake of family unity. And for what? To be erased from my own inheritance, to be rendered insignificant in the very home I had fought to preserve? Julian, who had never contributed a single cent, who had sometimes been absent even during major family gatherings, was to inherit everything. The injustice felt almost physical, a crushing weight pressing against my chest. I stared at the documents in disbelief. trying to reconcile the meticulous care I had taken with the overwhelming negligence they had shown toward me. Every word of that will felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I thought back to my youth, when my parents would praise Julian for his charm and easygoing nature, while I quietly cleaned, organized, and managed responsibilities no one else wanted. Even as a child, I had sensed a hierarchy I could not challenge. But I had chosen to stay, to keep faith in the idea that dedication and sacrifice would be acknowledged. Now, the realization hit me in full force. The family I had trusted, the parents I had adored, had always favored him. Their love had never been equal. It had been carefully measured and placed entirely on Julian. The betrayal was compounded by the thought of all the dreams I had postponed for them. I had declined a scholarship to study in Florence, turning down the chance to refine my design skills and explore the world, simply to remain close to my family. I had imagined that these sacrifices were meaningful, that they would be appreciated in some tangible way. But instead, I discovered that my value was defined not by what I gave, but by what I was born as, a daughter, apparently expendable. And Julian, carefree, irresponsible Julian, would step into the life I had built for him, inheriting the fruits of my labor without lifting a finger. The absurdity of it all made me laugh bitterly, though the sound was hollow and trembling. I wondered how they could justify it, how my parents could look at me and claim love, yet leave me with nothing while giving him everything. The discrepancy between their words and their actions created a dizzying swirl of anger, sadness, and disbelief inside me. As the rain tapped insistently against the estate's tall windows, I sat among the papers, numb and furious. The garden outside, once a place of calm, now seemed like a mocking stage for my torment. Lavender swayed gently in the wind, indifferent to the storm raging in my heart. I felt a sudden clarity amid the hurt. The past 7 years of sacrifice, the endless effort, the quiet endurance, all of it had been invisible to the people I had trusted most. Their preferential treatment of Julian was no accident. It was deliberate, a conscious choice that I had been blind to until now. I also felt a strange mix of fear and determination. Fear because the enormity of the betrayal threatened to consume me. Determination because understanding this truth gave me a new perspective. If my parents and Julian believed they could dismiss me, they had underestimated me. I had endured years of quiet labor and invisible service, but I was not powerless. I could not change their hearts or their will, but I could reclaim my own sense of self, my own agency, and my own destiny. Sitting there in that stately room, amidst stacks of legal documents and the scent of old wood and lavender, I made a vow. I would no longer exist merely as a caretaker, as the invisible daughter whose contributions were overlooked. Julian would have the estate, the accounts, and the privileges my parents had so easily handed him, but I would not remain a shadow in my own life. I would chart my own path, one not dictated by the arbitrary favoritism of a family that had chosen him over me. Yet even as I resolved to move forward, I could not quell the ache of betrayal, the raw wound that cut deep into my sense of belonging. How could love coexist with such blatant inequality? How could a family claim to be just, yet render one child invisible? These questions would haunt me, gnawing at my thoughts and dreams, but they also ignited a quiet fire. A fire that whispered that I was stronger than their favoritism, wiser than their bias, and capable of creating a life that acknowledged my worth, not theirs. That rainy afternoon in Lyon, surrounded by faded grandeur and the lingering scent of lavender, I understood a harsh truth. Family could disappoint, betray, and deceive, but it could never define me. The estate, the money, the inherited privileges, they belonged to Julian. My inheritance would not come in euros or titles, but in the courage to claim my own space in the world, to honor my own efforts and sacrifices. And though the pain was sharp and the betrayal deep, I realized that the discovery of their favoritism was not the end. It was the beginning of a reckoning, not with them, but with myself, and with the life I was determined to build beyond their shadows. Tense confrontation. I couldn't hold it in any longer. My hands shook as I lifted the folder containing the will and looked directly into my father's eyes. "Is this how you treat me?" I asked, my voice cold but heavy with outrage. I've paid the mortgage, repaired the house, taken care of every little expense while Julian does nothing. And yet you leave everything to him? My father, usually the picture of calm, dressed in his linen suit with the effortless elegance of a French gentleman, paled. He stammered, "Elise, you're misunderstanding. It's not that simple." "Not that simple?" I nearly shouted. "How is it not simple, father? I see clearly what this is. Julian is the golden child, while I am just a free servant." My mother, her platinum hair perfectly styled, entered the room. Seeing the folder in my hands, she froze for a moment, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she quickly masked it with her usual poise. "Elise, darling, you don't need the inheritance," she said, her tone saccharine yet calculating. "You have your career. You are independent. Julian needs our care. He's not as strong as you are." Her words hit like a dagger. They hadn't just erased me from the will, they framed it as a favor, as if I should feel honored to be cast aside. I set the folder down on the desk, forcing my breathing to slow. "I understand," I said, my voice icy. "I understand exactly where I stand in this family." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, leaving my mother's faint, pleading calls behind me. The decision to change. I never returned to the estate after that day. No calls, no messages, no checking in to see if they were all right. For the first time in years, I allowed them to confront their own problems without me. If a pipe burst, they could hire a plumber. If a mortgage payment came due, let Julian deal with it. I was exhausted from being the family rescuer who never received respect. 2 weeks passed in silence. I imagined they would soon realize they needed me, but they instead played their usual manipulative games. One day, my phone lit up with a message from my father. "Property taxes are due soon. Can you help?" No inquiry about how I was, no apology, just a brazen demand as though I were still their walking, talking bank. I smirked and replied, "Surely Julian can handle it since the house belongs to him now." 5 minutes later, my mother called. I didn't answer. Another message arrived. "Elise, don't be like this. We need to talk." Talk? Now, when the money was safe and the inheritance assigned, they suddenly wanted to talk. I responded, "There's nothing to talk about. You've made your choice. Now live with it." I thought that would be enough to end it all, but I was wrong. Julian, the carefree, reckless brother, jumped into the fray. His message made my blood boil. "You're overreacting. It's just money. What's the big deal? Help mom and dad like you always do." I almost laughed at the sheer audacity. "Then why don't you use your inheritance to pay the mortgage?" I texted back. Silence. Then my mother messaged again, this time with theatrical grief. "Elise, we are family. Families help each other. We raised you. Now you abandon us?" I inhaled deeply and typed back, "You abandoned me the moment you left me out of the will. Julian can take care of you now." For the next several days, I avoided the estate entirely. I poured myself into work, walking the streets of Paris with my sketchbooks and design plans, finding solace in the rhythm of my own life. Yet every message from my family, every notification from Julian felt like a tiny electric shock reminding me of their disregard. Julian's arrogance was relentless. "Seriously, Elise, chill out," he texted one evening. "It's not like I'm getting everything tomorrow. Relax." His tone implied not only entitlement but condescension, as if my years of effort meant nothing. I closed my eyes, imagining all the evenings I had spent coordinating repairs, negotiating with contractors, and meticulously budgeting for repairs and furnishings. How dare he act as if the inheritance and my sacrifices were trivial? I decided then that words alone were no longer sufficient. They had manipulated, belittled, and taken advantage of me for years, expecting loyalty without reciprocity. And Julian, who had been indulged at every turn, had learned from their example that he could get whatever he wanted. I realized that the only way to reclaim my dignity was through action, not argument. The next day, I drafted a careful plan. I would not return to Lion, not until they demonstrated a willingness to acknowledge me as their equal. Every repair, every mortgage payment, every trivial task they had relied upon me for would be their responsibility. Julian would experience firsthand the burden he had so long ignored. For too long, my patience had disguised the injustice. Now, he and my parents would see the consequences. The emotional storm. Even as I planned, the emotional storm raged inside me. Memories of childhood unfairness, of my father praising Julian for minor accomplishments while my contributions went unnoticed, played like a relentless film. I recalled the evenings I had stayed behind to complete tedious work while Julian wandered the streets, carefree, oblivious to the practicalities of life. The resentment, once dormant, now burned hot and undeniable. Yet anger alone was not enough. I needed clarity. I revisited the documents I had found, the will, the estate plans, the intricate allocations of accounts and properties. Each line screamed of favoritism. Julian's name appeared repeatedly, in bold, meticulously positioned to maximize his gain. My own inclusion was tokenistic at best, almost a mockery of fairness. My parents' love, I realized, had never been unconditional. It had been selective, performative, and utterly transactional. I felt the sting of betrayal, but I also felt a strange liberation. If their love was conditional and their favor unjustly granted, then their power over me was an illusion. I could no longer rely on their validation, their approval, or their approval of my worth. It was time to assert my autonomy, to stop asking for permission to exist fully in the world, to stop placing my life at the mercy of those who had never truly seen me. Julian's response. Of course, Julian's response was predictably patronizing. He sent a barrage of messages, alternating between feigned concern and thinly veiled insult. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he wrote. "You're still part of the family, Elise. You're just being dramatic." His words, meant to minimize my feelings, only intensified my resolve. I realized that his entire upbringing had conditioned him to expect indulgence. Every demand met, every whim granted, had taught him that the world owed him. And yet, despite the unfairness, I could not allow my anger to dictate my actions. My response had to be deliberate, measured, and purposeful. I would not react emotionally to his provocations. Instead, I would let the consequences of neglect fall where they belonged, on him and on our parents. Redefining family boundaries. For the first time, I considered what it meant to be a family, not in terms of obligation or inheritance, but in terms of respect, mutual recognition, and fairness. I realized that my previous understanding of family had been skewed by expectations rather than reality. Love, as my parents defined it, was transactional. Care, as they practiced it, was contingent upon usefulness and obedience. My redefinition of family meant removing myself from that hierarchy and refusing to perpetuate it. I did not cut ties out of spite. I did it to reclaim my self-respect, to protect my mental and emotional well-being. Each decision, to ignore their messages, to deny Julian the easy reliance he had always taken for granted, to let them confront the household responsibilities themselves, was an act of quiet empowerment. It was not vengeance, it was reclamation. The first test of resolve. Within days, the estate began to present problems they could no longer ignore. A leaking roof worsened after a storm, contractors called repeatedly, invoices piled up. Julian, unprepared for responsibility, floundered. My parents, accustomed to my intervention, grew increasingly frantic. Calls and messages flooded my phone, alternating between desperation, manipulation, and thinly veiled guilt-tripping. Each time, I reminded myself of the clarity I had achieved that rainy afternoon when I first discovered the will. I would not rescue them. Julian would experience the weight of consequences. My parents would see what it meant to take one child for granted while favoring another. And through it all, I maintained a measured distance, my own life continuing uninterrupted in Paris, my career advancing, my independence unshaken. A new perspective. By the end of the month, I had come to understand the full scope of my decision. I had chosen boundaries over obedience, integrity over approval, and self-respect over familial validation. Confrontation with my parents and Julian was not a single moment but an ongoing process, a tense and unrelenting challenge that tested my patience, fortitude, and sense of justice. Through it all, I discovered that liberation from toxic favoritism requires more than recognition. It requires action. The estate, the inheritance, the privileges, they could all be claimed by Julian and my parents, but my own life, my agency, and my self-worth were mine alone. In that tension, in that ongoing standoff, I found a power I had never known I possessed. And so I continued to live fully, deliberately, and unapologetically, leaving the burdens of entitlement and manipulation to those who had chosen them. The social media war. I had thought everything would stop there, that the confrontation, the boundary setting would be enough. But it wasn't. One morning, I opened Facebook and froze. There it was, my mother's post. She had written a long, pointed message, full of insinuations about raising a selfish child, and the notion that true family means sacrifice for each other. My father wasn't going to be outdone. He posted a dramatic entry of his own. "We have given our children everything, yet the one we trusted most turns their back when we need them." He even tagged me, adding a mocking flourish. "Hope you're happy, Elise." But the hardest blow came from Julian. He crafted a post dripping with fabricated righteousness. "Some people only care about money and don't understand what family truly means, love and sacrifice. I am willing to do everything for my parents, but some only think of themselves." I stared at the screen, disbelief and fury twisting inside me. They had painted me as the villain, while I was the one who had sacrificed years of my life, my money, and my dreams for this family. The injustice was suffocating. I hadn't planned to respond, but my anger boiled over. I opened a new post and began typing, determined to expose the truth. "I have stayed silent for too long," I began. "But I cannot let my family defame me any further. I have paid the mortgage for my parents' estate, handled every single bill, repaired every broken door for 7 years. And Julian? He has never contributed a single cent, never worked a day in his life. Yet my parents have decided to leave everything to him, as if I do not exist." I recounted every sacrifice I had made, turning down career opportunities to stay close to my family, the sleepless nights worrying about finances, the mounting stress of keeping their estate afloat. I described the crushing sense of betrayal when I discovered the will, left out of recognition, left out of inheritance, treated as if my existence were inconsequential. "I am not a wallet for my parents to draw from when it suits them. I am a human being and I deserve respect," I wrote. My post ended with a firm declaration. "I have done enough. It is time for me to live for myself." The response was immediate. Friends, colleagues, even distant relatives reached out to support me. One aunt wrote, "Elise, you have always been the one who sacrificed the most. Your parents are gravely mistaken." Messages poured in from people who had witnessed my quiet labor over the years and now felt compelled to affirm my worth. Of course, my family refused to yield. Julian texted me directly. "You are a traitor, daring to shame the family like this." My father called shortly after, shouting down the line, "You have destroyed everything, Elise. You will regret this." I felt a strange mixture of vindication and exhaustion. Vindication because finally the truth was out there, because people could see my side for once. Exhaustion because the battle had escalated far beyond what I had imagined. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It had become a war played out in public on social media, where every word could be scrutinized, misinterpreted, or weaponized. Still, I refused to retreat. I did not apologize, I did not delete the post, and I did not soften my words. This was no longer about convincing them. It was about reclaiming my narrative. I had spent years deflecting blame, smoothing over conflicts, and absorbing injustices. Now I would stand firm and let my voice be heard. The online backlash was immediate. Some friends of Julian's who had only seen his side started messaging me, questioning my motives, accusing me of exaggeration. I ignored them. I focused instead on the people whose judgment mattered, those who had seen the quiet, consistent sacrifices I had made, those who understood that love without respect is meaningless. As the hours passed, I realized that my post had done more than express anger. It had drawn boundaries, clearly signaling that I would no longer be exploited. Every comment of support was a small affirmation of my agency, a reminder that I did not need their approval to validate my worth. The network of people who mattered, friends, colleagues, even some distant relatives, stood with me, lending credibility to the truth I had fought to preserve in private for years. Meanwhile, the family's attempts to shame me only exposed their hypocrisy. Julian's posts about love and sacrifice sounded hollow when contrasted with the reality of his lifestyle. Indulgent, entitled, utterly dependent on the labor of others. My parents' declarations about raising a selfish child rang false in light of their favoritism, their selective praise, and their neglect of my contributions. By the end of the day, I felt an odd mix of relief and clarity. Confrontation, once private, was now public. And in that visibility, I found power. I could not control my parents' or Julian's reactions, but I could control my own voice and my own narrative. I had moved from silent endurance to assertive transparency. I had stopped being invisible, stopped being the quiet caretaker, and stepped into the light, unafraid of exposure. The social media war was only a single chapter, but it marked a turning point. For the first time in my life, I was not responding out of obligation, fear, or guilt. I was responding from a place of truth, from a recognition that my sacrifices had value, that my voice deserved to be heard, and that family dynamics, no matter how manipulative, could not dictate my sense of self. Even as my phone continued to ping with messages from both supporters and detractors, I felt a calm certainty settle within me. The battle had shifted. I was no longer reacting defensively, I was asserting, claiming, and defining my life on my own terms. And for the first time, I could envision a path forward that honored my contributions, respected my labor, and refused to bow to unfairness, entitlement, or favoritism. The social media war had begun as an attack, a manipulation of narrative and perception. But by the end of that day, it had become my instrument of liberation, a public declaration of the life I was determined to lead, a life no longer constrained by family expectations or unjust hierarchies. And in that declaration, I found something I had not anticipated: freedom. Climax of the drama. One morning, while I was immersed in work at my design office in Paris, the phone rang. The receptionist's voice trembled slightly. "Elise, your parents are here. They say it's urgent." I froze. They had actually traveled from Lyon to Paris, showing up unannounced just because I refused to fund them? I walked down to the lobby, my heart pounding with anger. There they stood, my father, mother, and Julian, like a small army ready to force me into submission. My mother, draped in a luxurious fur coat, began her performance. "Elise, we need to talk. You can't abandon your family." My father barked. "Are you going to let us lose the house because of your pride?" I straightened my spine, meeting their eyes with unwavering determination. Pride? You left me out of the will, treated me like an outsider. Now I stop paying and suddenly I'm the villain? How absurd. I turned to Julian, who was attempting a casual, innocent air. "And you, Julian, you're 27. Grow up. Want to inherit the house? Start paying for it yourself." My mother began to cry, but I recognized it as a tactic, a calculated move. My father stepped closer, attempting intimidation. "We raised you, Elise. You owe us." I laughed coldly. "I've repaid that debt thousands of times over. I owe you nothing more." Without another word, I walked back inside and slammed the door, leaving their calls and protests behind. Returning to my apartment, I saw a message from my mother. Elise, we're about to lose the house. What about you? I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked all three of them. Consequences and liberation. After that day, I felt a freedom I had never known. I was no longer the unwilling rescuer of my family. I focused on my work, landing a major interior design project for a boutique hotel in Nice. I began traveling, enjoying weekends in Provence, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. My family no longer contacted me, but I heard whispers that they had sold part of their estate to cover debts. Julian, according to a friend, finally got a job part-time at a cafe, but at least he had begun taking responsibility. I felt no satisfaction, but neither guilt. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. Looking back, I realized that their betrayal had been a disguised gift. Forced me to stand up, reclaim my self-worth, and live a life unbound by toxic expectations. For the first time, I was free to define my own happiness, pursue my own dreams, and honor my own sacrifices without apology or interference.